We got the sashimi.
Oh my gosh, how sweet. For my kids?
Yeah, for the kids, and we go for like animal whales or...
I love this, thank you.
It's more animal whales, but more jerseys. It's like sashimi or pan food for what team you go for, but...
So we have two, we can root for one or the other.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
This is so good, thank you guys.
The video of Meghan Markle exchanging gifts with two Down syndrome YouTubers during the recent Australian tour has now gone viral for operationally damaging reasons, and Lady Colin Campbell has placed on the public record the analytical framework through which the visible discomfort in the footage can be read. The video, which the Meghan's Mole independent commentary platform circulated with the framing that Meghan is structurally awkward around people with disabilities, shows the two YouTubers presenting Meghan with NFL jerseys, a container of chicken salt, and sunscreen. The structural feature visible in the footage is that Meghan operationally cannot conceal her underlying discomfort with the exchange. Her smile is calibrated, her engagement is performative. The thank yous are operationally automatic rather than substantive. The structural meaning Campbell develops is that Meghan is uncomfortable not specifically around people with disabilities, but around anyone she operationally cannot exploit and over whom she does not feel she has a hold.
And because she's not a very good actress, she isn't able to conceal her lack of empathy. And also, she is so arrogant and disdainful, and so in her private life, often used to riding the hobby horse of superiority.
The disability framing in the viral framing is therefore the symptom rather than the underlying cause. The operational details of the gift exchange are worth presenting in close documentary register because they capture the structural disjunction between the giver's substantive engagement and the recipient's calibrated performance. The first YouTuber presented Meghan with an NFL football, framing it as a gift for the children with the practical observation that since the household supports the San Francisco 49ers, it would be appropriate for the children to receive American football paraphernalia.
Got
Oh, what's this?
chicken salt.
Never heard of it.
You heard chicken salt before?
Chicken salt.
You can put in the chips, or you can make your like dinner, your recipe, like.
This is great. You can put in potato fries, baked chicken, rice dishes, or simply use as a salt substitute. Does it have a more umami flavor because of the chicken, a little savory?
Yeah.
I like that.
It's good for you, like cheese. And this one,
What's this?
sunscreen,
Very important.
safety.
Thank you. Yes, and we live in a really sunny place just like you do.
Yeah.
This is very important.
Meghan's response operates at the calibrated register with the expression, "Oh my gosh, how sweet," followed by the operational redirection toward the children's preferences. The second item is the chicken salt, an Australian product that the YouTubers explain as a savoury salt substitute used on chips, baked chicken, and rice dishes. Meghan's response is the operationally polite, does it have a more umami flavour, followed by the expression, "I like that," which the documentary record indicates does not match her underlying facial response. The third item is sunscreen, presented with the framing of safety and the operational observation that the donors live in a sunny place comparable to California. The cumulative structural feature of these three exchanges is that the giver in each case is operating from a position of substantive engagement and goodwill. The recipient is operating from a position of performative response without the underlying substantive engagement the giver's effort warrants.
She is a very troubled woman. And now a particular video is going viral, Lady C, and I really wanted your take on this. So Meghan's Mole posted, "You can tell how awkward and uncomfortable Meghan Markle is around people with disabilities." Now, this was the video filmed in Australia during that tour, and it's her with two Down syndrome YouTubers. But
the structural significance of the gift selection itself is consequential because it reflects the YouTuber's substantive thoughtfulness about what would operationally interest the recipient family. The NFL football reflects the substantive observation that the household supports an American football team and that the children might benefit from related sports equipment. The chicken salt reflects the substantive observation that the recipient is a documented home cook with substantive interest in culinary experimentation, and that an Australian regional product would operationally interest such a cook. The sunscreen reflects the substantive observation that the household operates in a sunny climate and that practical health-related items would be operationally useful. The structural meaning is that the YouTubers approached the gift exchange with substantive consideration of the recipient's documented interests and household configuration. The recipient's response operates at a substantially lower register of substantive engagement than the gifts deserved. This is the central operational reading of the Outspoken broadcast hosted by Dan Wootton with Lady Colin Campbell this week, and the broadcast develops the analytical framework that Campbell has constructed across decades of substantive engagement with the subject of narcissism. Campbell's professional standing on this question is consequential because she authored Daughter of Narcissus, the substantive memoir and analytical work derived from her own experience with a mother whose narcissistic disposition shaped Campbell's early life. The book is not a casual celebrity commentary. It is the substantive analytical work of an established author whose personal experience required her to develop the operational framework through which the narcissistic pattern can be recognized and analyzed.
Because many narcissistic women victimize their husbands and turn them into what Donald Trump called pussy whipped. And let's face facts, Harry is pussy whipped. You only need to look at him on his own and then look at him with Meghan, and he's he's a study in being a pathetic.
The framework Campbell deploys on Meghan is therefore not a partisan attack. It is the application of an analytical model that Campbell has spent decades refining through professional and personal engagement. The structural feature of narcissism that Campbell develops is operationally direct. The narcissist's self-presentation as more special and better than anyone else operates as the overcompensation for an early awareness of underlying inadequacy. Most narcissists on Campbell's professional reading carry crashing inferiority complexes that the operational arrogance is structured to obscure. The arrogance is therefore not the underlying disposition, but the protective scaffold around the underlying vulnerability. The structural problem with this configuration is that the protective scaffold requires sustained operational reinforcement. Each interaction must operationally confirm the narcissist's specialness. Interactions with figures who cannot perform this confirmation are operationally threatening because they introduce the possibility that the underlying vulnerability might surface. The narcissist therefore restricts the range of available interactions to those that provide the operational confirmation the protective scaffold requires. The structural application to Meghan is operationally direct. Meghan, on Campbell's framing, operates with a holdover framework. She is comfortable with people over whom she has operational leverage.
I think she's a rotten actress. And I don't only think her contempt and disdain is reserved for people with disabilities. She has no empathy.
She is uncomfortable with people over whom she does not. The disabled YouTubers offer no operational leverage. They cannot advance her commercial position. They cannot extend her institutional standing. They cannot provide the operational confirmation her underlying disposition requires. The structural result is that her engagement with them is calibrated, performative, and visibly uncomfortable. The cumulative documentary record across multiple comparable interactions confirms this pattern. The disability framing is the visible signal of the underlying configuration, not its substantive cause. The structural contrast with Princess Diana that Campbell develops is consequential because it captures the distinction between authentic empathy and its operational imitation. Diana, on Campbell's framing, possessed genuine empathy for the disadvantaged because she operationally regarded herself as more vulnerable than she was.
One of the features of narcissism, Dan, is that you regard yourself as more special and better than anyone else, which is your overcompensation for an early awareness that you are actually inadequate on some level.
The vulnerability was real, sourced in the childhood trauma of her parents' separation and divorce and the custody battles that followed. The vulnerability stayed with Diana across her life. Her engagement with the disadvantaged operated through this underlying vulnerability rather than through performative calibration. The structural mechanism was that Diana could recognize the operational position of the disadvantaged because she occupied a parallel emotional position herself. Meghan does not possess this underlying vulnerability. Her engagement with the disadvantaged therefore operates through performative calibration rather than through substantive recognition. The operational result is the visible discomfort that the Down syndrome YouTuber's video has now captured for the public record. The Campbell-mother comparison is the structural illustration of how the narcissistic pattern can be operationally concealed by figures with appropriate social training. Campbell's mother, on her professional reading, was a narcissist of substantial register, but operated with the social training that allowed her to fake the empathetic response when appropriate. The training was sufficient that figures encountering her socially would characterize her as charming, glorious, and admirable. The underlying disposition emerged only in private contexts where the social performance was no longer operationally required. The structural feature of Meghan's configuration that distinguishes her from Campbell's mother is the inadequate acting capacity. Meghan, on Campbell's framing, is an appalling actress. She cannot operationally contain what is going on beneath the surface. The mask slips constantly, particularly with figures she perceives as beneath her. The Down syndrome YouTuber's video is the operational illustration of this slipping mask in real time. The Campbell broader analytical observation is that the operational success of the narcissistic pattern depends substantially on the acting capacity of the figure deploying it.
But my mother was well brought up and well bred, and she had impeccable manners socially. And so, I mean, the disdain and contempt she had for people was beyond belief. But when you met her socially, because she was properly brought up and knew how to behave and was a good enough actress to fake it.
Figures with strong acting training can maintain the empathetic performance across extended periods without the mask slipping. Figures with weaker acting capacity produce visible operational signals that audiences can read accurately. The structural meaning is that Meghan's professional Suits-era acting training was not, on the documentary record, sufficient to sustain the level of social performance her current configuration requires. The Hollywood production environment within which she developed her acting practice provided multiple takes, scripted dialogue, and post-production editing to compensate for the operational gaps in real-time performance. The Royal Public Engagement environment provides none of these supports. The performance must operate in real time, with the camera capturing whatever the underlying disposition produces. Meghan's training was not calibrated for this operational register. The result is the cumulative documentary record of mask-slipping moments that the Down syndrome YouTuber's video has now added to the public-facing archive. The Harry institutional disposition that Campbell addresses is the additional structural element worth presenting.
Meghan is an appalling actress. Meghan cannot contain what is going on beneath the surface. So the mask is constantly slipping, and it will inevitably slip with those who are beneath her in her perception.
Harry has, on Campbell's framing, been convinced by Meghan that she is the evocation of his mother. The structural problem with this conviction is that the convincing is operationally indefensible against the documented record of Diana's empathy and Meghan's documented discomfort. Diana could be tough, Diana was substantively complicated as a public figure. Diana had her own narcissistic features, but Diana possessed the underlying emotional vulnerability that produced genuine empathetic engagement with the disadvantaged. Meghan does not possess this underlying feature. Harry's conviction is therefore operationally based on Meghan's marketing framing rather than on the substantive comparison. The structural meaning is that the marriage operates partly through Harry's misidentification of Meghan as a Diana equivalent figure. The misidentification is operationally damaging because it sustains Harry's commitment to a relationship that the documentary record indicates is producing the visible psychological damage he has documented in his own public communications.
But Diana, whatever her failings, had genuine empathy for the disadvantaged, because
she did.
Diana
She really
genuinely felt that she was disadvantaged, and she was, as a result of the childhood trauma she endured during her parents' separation and divorce and custody battles.
The Trump P-whipped framing that Campbell endorses is the additional operational illustration. Donald Trump, during his public commentary on the Sussex situation, framed Harry as a figure who had been operationally subdued by his wife to the level at which his independent agency had substantially contracted. Campbell's professional reading confirms this framing. Harry, when observed alone, operates at one register. Harry, when observed with Meghan, operates at a substantially different and operationally diminished register. Campbell's framing is direct. He is a study in being pathetic. The structural meaning is that Harry's documented behavioral pattern in his wife's presence reflects the operational dynamics of the marriage configuration rather than his underlying personal capacity.
Diana could be a real toughie, but she had an emotional vulnerability that Meghan lacks, and that's why Diana was so good with the disadvantaged, and Meghan is so appalling. That's my take on it. I don't know what you think.
No, I think you're completely right. I really do. And I think I've got to stop these stunts because they're never going to work.
The marriage has reduced him at the operational level. The reduction is visible in the cumulative photographic and video record. The race card framing that Campbell addresses is the structural element worth presenting because it captures the underlying offence the Sussex household's deployment of racial framing has produced across communities, that the household has notionally been positioned as representing Campbell, who is herself Jamaican by birth, and develops the structural framework through her national context. The Jamaican national motto is, "Out of many, one people." The structural meaning is that Jamaican identity has historically incorporated the recognition that the national community includes figures of multiple ethnic origins operating as a unified people. The Sussex household's deployment of the race card, in Campbell's framing, operates against this unifying framework by treating ethnic identity as the operational basis of grievance. The structural offence is consequential because Meghan, in Jamaican terms, is operationally not a black woman. She is what Jamaican terminology recognizes as a brown woman, a figure of mixed heritage whose appearance places her in a specific category that Jamaican cultural discourse has historically identified with operational precision. The Sussex household's framing of Meghan as a black woman, particularly when deployed as the basis for institutional grievance, is therefore operationally indefensible against the structural reality of the relevant ethnic categories. The Campbell additional structural element is the documentary record of diplomatic engagement she has received from West Indian and African figures. Multiple diplomats and eminent figures of colour from the West Indies and from Africa have, at receptions and other professional engagements, expressed appreciation to Campbell for her continued critique of the Sussex household. The structural reasoning the diplomats have provided is that the household has caused operational difficulties in their native lands by deploying racial framing in ways that complicate the diplomatic and institutional relationships those countries have with the United Kingdom. The Sussex framing has produced public relations difficulties that the affected governments have had to manage. The structural meaning is that the Sussex household's framing of itself as the voice of communities of colour is operationally indefensible against the documented response of those communities' actual representatives. The household has been operationally rejected by the communities it has claimed to represent. The one-drop rule structural element that Campbell references is the additional operational framework worth presenting. The one-drop rule is the American legal and cultural framework under which any African ancestry, however distant, operationally categorized a figure as black for institutional purposes. Campbell's professional position is that the rule should not, in her analytical view, be deployed as a contemporary framing instrument. The historical operational injustice the rule produced does not validate its continuing deployment as a framework for racial categorization.
She's pretending that she is positioned for great success when we all know that everything she does commercially is a flop. And it has to be a flop because people don't like her. People don't buy products from celebrities who are unlikable.
The Sussex household, on her framing, has nevertheless operationally deployed the rule as the basis for its racial framings. The structural inconsistency is that the household uses the one-drop rule to position Meghan as a black woman, while operationally refusing the same framing when applied to other figures whose ancestry would equally qualify under the rule. The selective deployment of the framing operates as the analytical signal that the framing is instrumental rather than substantive. The Diana Indian heritage Campbell references is the additional structural element worth presenting. Campbell placed Diana's Indian heritage on the documentary record through her 1992 biography. The framing was operationally controversial at the time. 25 years later, the Times of India placed the same finding on the front pages of its newspapers with substantial pride. Prince William provided DNA samples that operationally confirmed the Indian ancestry through the maternal line. The structural meaning is that Diana, on the one-drop rule that the Sussex household deploys for its racial framing, was operationally a woman of colour. The Sussex framing of Meghan as the first woman of colour to enter the senior royal family is therefore operationally inaccurate against the documented record. The framing depends on the audience not recognising Diana's documented Indian heritage. The Queen Charlotte ancestry is the further structural element. Queen Charlotte was 6 times descended from Madragana of Faro, who was either a North African or a Sub-Saharan African woman. The Bridgerton television series has taken the historical detail and developed it into operational entertainment in ways that exceed the strict documentary record. The underlying historical detail is, however, substantive. The British royal family has carried ancestry that the one-drop rule would categorise as African across multiple centuries. The Sussex framing that operationally positions Meghan as the historical first in this dimension is therefore additionally indefensible against the documented family history. The Thomas Markle return to the United States is the operational development that closes the structural picture this week. Markle, who has been operationally based in the Philippines for an extended period, including the lower leg amputation surgery and the prosthetic leg fitting work, has now returned to American soil. The structural meaning of the return is that the geographical excuse the Sussex household has historically deployed for Meghan's non-engagement with her father is operationally no longer available. Markle is reachable. The reception of medical care at American facilities operates within the same logistical framework that the Sussex household's own healthcare arrangements operate within. The decision not to engage now reflects the operational disposition of the household rather than any logistical constraint. The structural meaning is that the Markle estrangement has now been operationally confirmed as a choice rather than as a circumstance. The Samantha Markle context is the additional structural element worth presenting. Samantha Markle, Meghan's half-sister, has operated as one of the more visible Markle family voices on the documentary record across recent years. Samantha's communications have included substantial frustration about Meghan's treatment of their father, including the operational difficulty of supporting their father through the medical challenges he has faced while his daughter has maintained estrangement. The structural feature of Samantha's engagement is that she has provided substantive context on the Markle family configuration that the Sussex household's public framing systematically omits. The Thomas Markle return to the United States is, on the public record, partly the operational result of Samantha's sustained advocacy for her father's welfare. The structural meaning is that the Markle family has functional members who continue to engage substantively with Thomas Markle's welfare, while Meghan has operationally absented herself from any such engagement. The audience reading both elements simultaneously reaches the conclusion that the estrangement is not, on the documented record, the product of the entire Markle family being operationally difficult. It is the product of Meghan's specific decision to maintain estrangement while other family members maintain engagement. The Campbell structural framing on why the estrangement is operationally maintained is consequential. Meghan, on her framing, has told Harry sufficient operational falsehoods about her past, her accomplishments, and her experiences that she now operationally fears the consequences of any direct Harry Markle interaction. The structural risk is that Markle, in any sustained conversation with Harry, would correct the false framings that Meghan has constructed across the marriage. The corrections would produce the operational disconfirmation of substantial elements of Meghan's self-presentation to Harry. The structural meaning is that the estrangement is operationally protective of the marriage's underlying configuration. The configuration depends on Harry continuing to operate within the false framings. Direct Markle access would compromise the configuration. The estrangement therefore operates as the structural mechanism through which the configuration is protected. The Campbell additional structural framing on what Harry should now do is operationally direct. Harry has, in Campbell's framing, displayed interest in meeting Markle and developing some operational relationship. Meghan has stymied the engagement at every turn. The structural feature is that if Harry simply boarded a plane and visited Markle without seeking Meghan's permission, Meghan would have no operational choice but to accept the engagement. Her ability to threaten the marriage as the consequence of the engagement is operationally limited by the absence of a billionaire successor configuration. The structural prediction Campbell offers is that Harry's execution of the visit would operationally liberate both parties. Meghan would no longer need to perform the simpering social register she currently maintains in Harry's presence. Harry would no longer need to operate within the false framings that the marriage's configuration depends on. The structural meaning is that the operational pathway for Harry to recover his independent agency is available. The pathway requires him to execute a decision that the marriage's current configuration is calibrated to prevent. The closing observation is that the Down syndrome YouTuber's video, the Campbell narcissism framework, the Diana empathy contrast, the Harry P-whipped operational position, the race card structural offence, the Diana and Queen Charlotte ancestry corrections, the Thomas Markle return, and the Campbell pathway prescription are facets of the same broader structural configuration. The Sussex household operates through framings that the documentary record systematically undermines. The Geneva empty streets, the Mama's Little Helper Instagram exploitation, the one-off fashion commercialization, the autobiography preparation program, the contracting commercial pipeline, and the contracting cultural permission operate as the operational consequences of the documentary record reaching the cultural permission threshold. The audience reads the cumulative pattern accurately. The institutional response continues to consolidate. The financial mathematics continue to work through the runway. On the Wakeford analysis remains at approximately 5 years against the current burn rate. Within that window, the operational pressure will continue to intensify. The Campbell analytical framework will continue to operate as the substantive lens through which the underlying disposition can be read.